Hey gang, David Littlejohn back today to talk about our debt to GDP ratio. Very simply, debt is the money that we owe other people, and obligations is the money that we're going to owe to other people. Washington has both the debt and obligations. How much debt do we currently have? About $17 trillion. To give you a visual idea, $100 bills stacked around the Statue of Liberty. This will give you an idea of what our current debt looks like at about $17 trillion. Here's the challenge. Gross domestic product. If you were to take everything that we produce in this country in a year, all the things that we manufacture, all the services that we provide, total about $15.7 trillion, plus or minus a little bit. 17 trillion of debt and 15 trillion of gross domestic product. We have a bit of a problem here, and the fact that we still are spending $600 billion a year more than we're actually bringing in tax revenue. So the $600 billion, 3.8% of our gross domestic product in that $600 billion. So basically our economy has to grow at 3.8% just to break even with our overspending problem right now. Reality check for you. If we have a $3.5 trillion budget, which is actually lower than what it is, and we had GDP of $16 trillion, which is actually higher than it is, then we would need to tax every American, if we had only income taxes and no other kind of tax, nearly 22% on average of the entire gross domestic product to pay for everything we are spending. Basically, every American, that's assuming using today's tax tables, that every American would need to earn about $109,000. And we could tax them, and the blended tax rate based on the tables would work out to about 22%. Of course, the challenge is median income in this country is about $51,000. So we've got a little bit of a gap there. We're not bringing in enough tax revenue to cover what we are spending. We got three things that we could do. We could raise the taxes. We could lower what we're spending. Or we could do what we have been doing, which is kick the can down the road politically. Just keep borrowing money and hoping that someday it will go away. We all know better. Nonetheless, that's what's occurring. But that's not the whole story, that 17 trillion. See, we have some other obligations on the Fed's balance sheet that we're not talking about. Things like Social Security and Medicare for baby boomers as they age into the system. We're going to expect higher Medicare expenses, higher Social Security expenses, because we will have more people participating in the program. So the unfunded liability that we are anticipating down the road is approximately $125 trillion. To give you an idea, here's the Statue of Liberty surrounded by $100 bills now. Significantly more serious. Well, what would we do? Let's look at some ugly math. If we were to only pay the interest on the down payment of our unfunded liabilities, we'd need about $12.5 trillion, and we'll pay interest on that. That's 10% of our outstanding unfunded liabilities. Add that to our existing debt, and then pay interest of 2%, which is really too low historically. Then what we would do is we'd be paying interest on about $30 trillion at 2%. That's another $600 billion of debt service. Add that in to the $3.5 trillion we're already spending, and what we really need to do is cover $4.1 trillion of expenses. So the deficit's even wider than we think. That would mean that every American would need to be taxed closer to 25.6% rather than the just below 22 we discussed earlier. So the math is not real exciting. Of course, this doesn't include things like corporate taxes that could certainly offset it, because we know that corporately speaking, companies make money. They don't pass it out to all of the Americans and let us pay with all of their money. But we also aren't talking about any of the state taxes. So we've kind of got something on both sides of the equation. Now, I'm not here to say what the solution is. I'm simply identifying the problem, that we're faced with one of three things to do: raise the taxes, lower the spending, or we can continue to kick the can until we can't kick it any further. We don't know where that is, by the way. But we know why it gets kicked. Bottom line is, nobody wants to be the one that reduces benefits or increases costs. It's politically untenable, and yet that's probably what we as voters need to consider, is holding our representatives accountable for that kind of spending, because sooner or later, if we don't, we know what's coming. So again, this is David Littlejohn, and a reminder as always, this is not supposed to be considered investment advice, nor is it tax advice. Past performance is not indicative of future results. If you have any additional questions, do not hesitate to contact me at info@littlejohnfs.com. Don't forget to like the video. Thanks, Dave Littlejohn. You've been schooled.